Number 1. This all literally just happened within the past hour. I got out of work at 6:30 PM and went to McDonald's to get an iced coffee. I pull up to the drive-thru and there is a red truck in front of me with a cap on the bed. It's super wide, so I can't see their mirrors and thus can't get a glimpse of who is inside. I'm minding my own business, listening to unsolved mysteries on YouTube, when I see that the red truck has pulled up to the second pickup window. You know, there is the window where you pay, and then 2 separate windows where you pick up your food. I didn't think anything of it and just assumed that they had a bigger order, and the McDonald's employee asked them to pull up so I could get my iced coffee. I look up to see the truck's reverse lights come on. Okay, they must have pulled up a little too far and are backing up a little. No big deal. They keep backing up without signaling to me at all that they are backing up. I slowly back up too. Luckily, no one is behind me. They keep backing up until they are finally parked to the first pickup window now. The McDonald's employee looks out of the window at me, shrugs and gives me a look like, I don't know why they did that. A few minutes go by, and at this point I'm just thinking about how strange and not part of common etiquette it was to back up without signaling to anyone you need to do so. They could have easily hit me had I not been looking straight ahead, curious as to what they were doing. Now, 5 minutes at least goes by. No one is being given any food. I just want my iced coffee, so I'm kind of annoyed that they backed up, thinking maybe they were told to go to the second window since I only needed the coffee, but that maybe they felt refusing to do so would get McDonald's to give them their food first or faster, and thus they backed up to the first pickup window. I don't know what was going on in their minds. Anyway, I continue to sit there and wait for my food, when I see the passenger door to the truck open. Out comes an older man, maybe 65 to 70 years old. He was wearing light khaki colored overalls and a dirty white t-shirt. He starts walking slowly over to my car. I'm thinking, maybe he's going to apologize to me for not signaling that they needed to back up. He gets to my passenger door window, turns so he is facing the window head on, and just stares at me. I'm waiting for him to signal to put my window down, thinking that he had something to say. He doesn't do anything. He just stands there and stares. He starts to lift his hand towards the door handle. I quickly lock the door. He scowls and walks back to the truck and gets back into the passenger side. They immediately drive away the second he closes his door. They didn't get any food. They didn't get anything. They just left. I pulled up to the drive-thru to finally get my iced coffee. It's been well over 10 minutes at this point, and I head home. At this point, I have more questions than answers. Why did they back up without signaling? Why did they need to back up anyway? Why did he get out of his truck? Why was he about to open my door? Why didn't he say anything? Why didn't they get their food or drinks? It might not be the creepiest story you've ever heard, but the whole ordeal made me so anxious that I was shaking the whole way ride home. I'm not the best at confrontation, clearly, and I just wish I had some insight or understanding to exactly what happened here. Number 2. I'm a 25-year-old female and have been living in Japan for a few years now. And one thing that I encounter quite frequently are stalkers. And it seems that in my area, or anywhere that isn't a big city now that I think about it, Japanese men can come to be quite obsessive with foreign women, especially fair-skinned, blonde-haired, blue-eyed foreign women such as myself. I've dealt with quite a few situations where I was sure that I'd be kidnapped. One such encounter was back in 2013, when I was in my 3rd year of university. The following was a very brief encounter, but a terrifying one nevertheless. I was studying abroad at a school in Saitama, making a lot of friends and having the time of my life. I joined the a cappella club and had a group that I sang with. Together, there were 5 of us. They were all men, which made me uncomfortable at first. But we blended well together, and they felt more comfortable singing English songs with me there to help with pronunciation and whatnot. One day, after practice was finished, my group invited me to go shopping with them to a local supermarket to get things for a nabe party. For those who don't know what a nabe is, it's basically a hot pot. You get a bunch of veggies and some meat, and then you put a big pot on a little portable gas burner, and everyone gathers around and eats together. It's a huge part of Japanese culture and a great way to hang out with friends. I was ecstatic that they invited me. I was usually left out of these kinds of things at first, because I was an outsider, whereas they had known each other since they were freshmen. Over the few months that we had been singing together though, they had grown to be like a family to me, each one like an overprotective big brother, especially a guy named Kosuke. He was tall and a bit on the heavy side, but he was extremely charismatic. Whenever he saw me fumbling around, nervous or confused, he'd quickly appear by my side and throw a heavy arm around my shoulder, practically knocking me over while asking, "What's the problem, Tane-chan?" Anyway, the nabe party. We all went to our friend's house for the party and ended up drinking and talking until pretty late. When my phone in my pocket vibrated to tell me that I had a low battery, I finally saw the time and realized it was already 4 a.m. The guys were getting ready to nap until the trains started back up, but I was only a 30-minute walk away from my share house. I announced that I was leaving and started packing my stuff up. Kosuke offered to walk me home, but I told him that I was fine. The sun would be rising soon. Japan has an early sunrise, and it really wasn't that far. The cold would kill me before the walk did, I joked. They reluctantly agreed and saw me off, demanding that I call them if anything happened. I made it to the station safely, marking the halfway point home. I descended the staircase to see a single car parked outside with a man leaning up against it, staring straight at me. It wasn't anyone that I knew. He was older than me, in his mid-30s, maybe early 40s. His head turned, watching me as I walked down the stairs. Feeling uncomfortable with the unwanted attention, I rushed my pace a little, rubbing my hands together to fight the sudden chill that overcame me, though I was pretty sure it had nothing to do with the cold. I crossed to the other side of the street, avoiding him as best as I could. I avoided looking at him as well, but I heard the car door slam and the engine start up. Headlights illuminated me, and he turned to drive alongside where I was walking. His window rolled down.
"Hey,"
he said in Japanese.
"Are you alone?"
I said nothing.
"Where are you going? Do you speak Japanese?"
I quickened my pace.
"You're pretty. Let's hang out."
I began power walking, and the sluggish tiredness from the party was quickly being replaced with adrenaline. He pulled ahead, and I thought he gave up, but his car stopped not far ahead, and he put it in park, getting out.
"Let's go home together."
He was standing about 10 feet ahead of me. I stopped so I wasn't walking closer to him.
"Let's go home together,"
he repeated a little bit more forcefully at this point, stepping towards me.
"Get in my car."
I didn't have much time to think. I immediately turned left and sprinted into the park. There were only 4 entrances, all of which a car could not enter. It was a traditional Japanese-style garden with tall bamboo trees and a pond of koi surrounding gazebo in the middle. The man was in a no parking zone, so he wouldn't leave his car alone. I heard him curse under his breath and jump back into the car. I pulled out my phone, immediately calling Kosuke. Just my luck though. He didn't answer. I tried the rest of my group. No one answered. I looked to the next exit just in time to see his car crawl by, very slowly, his head sticking out of the window searching for me as I hid behind a grove of bamboo. Trembling in fear, I tried again and again, with no success, to reach the guys. I looked repeatedly at my 4 exits, always seeing him crawl by. He was circling the park, waiting for me to walk out so he could talk to me again, though I had a feeling talking to him wasn't really what he wanted to do. Just as I was about to cry, my phone lit up dimly with a phone call from Kosuke.
"What's the problem, Tane-chan?"
he said jokingly. The other guys in the background were still joking around. In a rush of breath, I explained to him my current predicament. Though he didn't say a word the entire time, I could practically hear the smile leave his face. The rest of the group had quietened down at this point, and I heard one say,
"What's going on? Is she okay?"
He told me to stay where I was, and that he was on his way. But I was already 20 minutes away, and I wasn't sure that I had 20 minutes before the guy parked his car and came into the park to look for me. I looked behind me again, just in time to see him drive by the exit, slowly, looking through. That's it. I'm cold, I'm tired, I'm scared, and I want to go home. I'm going to run after he passes the exit next and turns the corner. I explained to Kosuke.
"No,"
he said. "Wait for me. I can run and be there soon." But Kosuke wasn't a runner. I didn't think he could get there any faster than I could. But my phone suddenly went dark. Dead battery. No turning back now. I waited a few seconds and there he was, right on schedule. The man crawled by the exit, slowly, and then stopped. My heart was pounding so hard, I was sure that he could hear it, but he looked hard and slowly all around the park. The sun was starting to come up now, and he had a better view. It really was now or never. He slowly moved forward. I crept out of my hiding spot and moved towards the exit. I poked my head out and saw him turn the corner. As soon as he did, I sprinted towards my house and didn't look back. I was too terrified, and adrenaline was absolutely making me fly. I didn't know if he saw me or if I was too fast to follow or what, but I didn't ever see that guy again. I immediately put my phone on the charger and called the guys back to let them know that I was okay. But Kosuke never let me walk home alone in the dark again.
Number 3.
I was 21, recently became a police officer, and was also recently dumped. So, my friend suggested Tinder. As a 21-year-old and a new cop, I had the "I'm invincible and I can take on anyone" mentality. I matched with a very good-looking, out-of-my-league female. We chatted and eventually set up a date to meet. She said she had a great open field to look at stars and hang out, and we could meet up at her house. So, the night came. I was excited, and she seemed to be quite excited as well when I picked her up. She guided me to the field, and it looked nice. Open space, woods, deer, and other wildlife. In the field, I noticed really dim headlights in the distance. Then, a van started driving towards us and pulled up in front of us, almost close enough to block me from going forward. I told her to stay in the car and I'll go say hi. I grabbed my flashlight that I had in my car and walked up. In the front driver's side of the van, there was a decently sized man. I asked him what was going on and if he could back his car up a little bit. He was very polite and said that he was the owner of the property and said that he didn't mean to scare us. He told me he'd been having trouble with poachers on his property and wanted to make sure that we weren't going to shoot at anything. I assured him that we only came out to look at some stars and wildlife. He was perfectly okay with that and told me to have a nice date and drove away. After that, the girl was texting non-stop. Around an hour later, I saw headlights coming towards us again, this time at a really fast pace. We hopped in the car and I moved it to a more defensive position, and the same man came close enough to almost hit my car. The girl then hopped out of my car at that point and ran towards the man. I immediately knew that I was fucked. I got out and gave them commands to back up and get on the ground. Neither of them complied, obviously. He then proceeded to charge me and knock me to the ground. Luckily, I was able to get him on his back and get up. I then saw my date grab a metal pipe from the van. She told me that they had a gun and to give them my money and truck, and I won't get hurt. Of course, with my I'm invincible mentality, I said no. She started to cry, saying that they didn't want to hurt me. He then started to go back towards the car. At that point, I told him that I was a cop, drew my concealed firearm, and told them to lay on the ground. After a moment of shock from all of us, they complied. I was able to call 911 and tell them my name and badge number. I had 2 people at gunpoint and needed backup immediately. I gave our dispatch the best directions I could to this field while on the phone, but they both fled. Again, stupid new cop young guy mentality. I chased them. I took off after the man who ran into the woods around the field. I chased him for maybe 30 seconds and heard 3 loud pops and saw muzzle flash. My I'm invincible mentality went right out of the window. I ran like hell back towards my car and peeled the hell out of there. I went back to the area that I picked her up in, called dispatch again, and had officers come to that location. Of course, the first officers to pull up was my sergeant and my field training officer. Of course, they were both completely understanding and didn't give me any shit about it at all. The most used words were dumbass and stupid fucking rookie. I hopped in their car and went towards the field. Luckily, the van was still there. I was told to shut my mouth and only come out if they start getting shot at. They cleared the area and started looking in the van. They found meth right on the center console, and then they searched the car. What scared me the most was when my field training officer and sergeant came back to the patrol car, let me out, and told me to come look in the back of the van. Both of them were pale, looked horrified. I went to the back of the van where there were several knives, duct tape, lighter fluid, a decent amount of rifle ammunition, handcuffs, and what looked to be dried blood. In the front seat passenger side, we found an AR-15 style rifle and 2 more handguns. We called for immediate backup and detectives. When they investigated the blood, it turns out that it wasn't blood at all. The plates had been stolen, and the van was also reported stolen. I still get a tough time about the whole encounter, but luckily, no one got hurt. I will never use online dating again. Ever.
Number 4.
This story happens in the Latin American country that I was living in at the time. I'm a female, and at the time I was 22 years old, finishing my master's degree in the local university. I had a part-time job as a receptionist in an institute and usually had the afternoon shift. I left work every day around 8:30 p.m. to go to the bus stop and then walk like 5 minutes to get home. Even though this was and still is one of the most dangerous countries in the world, I lived in a relatively safe city in a good neighborhood. Still, I walked, very alert of my surroundings, and was ready to run or call the police if needed. Okay, this is where my story starts. For a few days, I had been seeing a very big, expensive white SUV with tinted windows driving around my neighborhood. I'd never seen it before, but I just thought it was a new neighbor. After a few days, I started noticing that the SUV seemed to follow me. It was always parked in a corner of my street and usually started driving when I walked past it. Obviously, it gave me the creeps, so I told my boyfriend and parents. Since the driver never did anything, just drove, not even slowly sometimes, they said it could be a coincidence and it could be, in fact, a new neighbor. What started as a nighttime encounter that went on for several weeks turned into a daytime encounter. The SUV started to follow me around the neighborhood, sometimes passing by me fast several times in a row, sometimes slowly, almost at the same speed that I was walking. I discreetly took note of the license plate and always kept it in my phone. I started to look for it everywhere that I went, and I noticed they followed me to other parts of the city. This really freaked me out, and I finally contacted the police. I didn't do it before because they're useless most of the time. They told me, of course, which was expected, that they couldn't do anything until something had happened. Otherwise, they could assume that it was coincidental. I was in panic mode. I even dreamed about this situation. I alerted my parents and my boyfriend, who was working in another city, as well as friends and co-workers. I even told my boss, and surprisingly, she let me go in and out of work at different schedules so as to try to avoid the driver. This seemed to work the first week, and I thought it was all over. Silly me, it wasn't. One morning, I was going to the bakery to buy some bread for lunch, and the SUV was right there. They started to slowly follow me, and I was very anxious and started to shake. The only thing I was thinking of was that I needed to run, but didn't want to alert them. For context and for you to picture this, my street was very long, and there were buildings only on one side, and the other side was a very tall wall. No houses, no people passing. My goal was to arrive to the little shopping center where the bakery was, but when I saw they were still following me, I knew that that was not a good option. They could get me on my way out. For the first time, it got confrontational. They rolled down one window and started to scream things at me. I can't even remember what it was as I was too scared to pay attention. So I decided to go to my friend's office, which was on the second story of the shopping center. I quickly ran up the stairs and went in her office. I told her how they were following me, and this time I had an even worse feeling about it. She got scared also and told me to go hide in the bathroom and lock the door. A few minutes later, surprise, surprise, a semi-fat, balding man in his 40s walks in and casually asks her about me. He said that he was driving down the street when he saw his cousin, referring to me, entering her office. Since it was a while that he'd seen his cousin, he wanted to say hi, but she didn't hear him calling her. So he parked his car outside and went up to greet her. He insisted to my friend that he saw me walking inside the office, but my friend, bless her, insisted with a poker face that no one had entered her workplace since a few hours ago. He asked if she was sure, as he kept telling the same story over and over again, and she insisted that there was no one and that she was alone. She asked him to leave. All the while, I was listening to this exchange from the bathroom, horrified. When he finally left, she shut down her office and told me it was safe to come out. I cried, petrified with fear and terror, and so was she. We immediately called the police. This time they took me very seriously as there was a witness, my friend, and as I had the license plate number, they agreed to patrol the neighborhood on a regular basis. My friend called her boyfriend, who was a taxi driver from the company downstairs, and he took me home because my legs were shaking and I just couldn't move. From that day onwards, I always had someone drive me in and out of work and school, or I took taxis, something I didn't do before as they were expensive. I think the police presence in the area spooked him, or maybe the police found him and had a talk with him. I never found out. I never want to know either. I shiver only thinking about what his intentions were with me, and the fear comes back again. My parents still live in the area, as does my friend, but I eventually moved out of the city. I hope I never see that white SUV again.
Number 5.
So, I had a frightening encounter with a stalker of mine. It happened with a guy who was in the army. He was this guy that just showed up at a bar that I frequented. He would sit down and drink at the bar alone, and kinda had this weird vibe about him, tall and slim, and always had his head hanging with his hat pulled down low to his face. One day, my friend Danny goes up to him and asks if he would like to join our table. Danny is kind of a collector of misfits, so it's not unusual for her to be friending strangers or out-of-towners. This guy joins our table and is really quiet. He just sort of watches crappy war videos on YouTube on his phone while hanging at the table. We got to know him a bit after that, seeing him a few times at the bar, and slowly he opens up. He told us about war stories from Afghanistan and how he was some big hero in Korangal Valley. I at this time had just moved from Canada and didn't really know much about the war and its specifics, but this guy really liked to try and chat my ear off about it and show me these videos. He liked to play himself as the hero and talk about how he wanted to settle down and have a stay-at-home wife and all that. I wasn't really into him, the conversation or the video, and honestly, he was so full of these stories about being blown up and rescuing this family from a fire and how he's up for the Medal of Honor. Just these really big elaborate stories that sounded kinda bullshit to me. But time goes on, and he continues to hang around my group of friends. At some point, this guy winds up getting my phone number from a friend. He would text me all these crazy things about how pretty he thought I was, and how he knew I was the one. He would text me that he wanted to take me away from my life, and one day I would see just how much I needed him. That he would provide me with everything that I needed, and that he wanted me to go back home with him when he was out and start a family, that I would make a great wife and a great mum. This guy knew nothing about me. I never really even talked to him as far as saying yeah, or okay when he would try to talk to me at the bar. I wasn't responsive to the texts, and frankly, they annoyed me more than creeped me out at that point. I was a pretty independent chick at that time who had a really good job on Capitol Hill, and this guy would text me like I was some shrew who needed to be taken care of. I tried to avoid this guy when we were all out, but he would try and sit next to me, or grab my hand, or come up behind me at the bar and stand close to me. He even would sniff my hair or neck. This guy had a thing for sweat. Another creepy thing he clued me into. I would tell him to knock it off, and he would keep persisting. Finally, I started to be a bit more firm, but he didn't back down. I brushed it off for longer than I should have. I was young, and he was kinda dopey, so I figured what harm could he be? The behavior continued, and eventually I had enough of it. I didn't want to cause any issue with my friends. I was kind of new to their circle, and was only in it because Danny had found and collected me as well. So I took a little hiatus from the bar. The texts continued, but they got more graphic. He started texting me about how much he missed me, how he missed the low-cut shirts that I would wear, and he missed smelling me. He texted me about how he wanted to sleep with me under a mountain of blankets so he could, I shit you not, dear listener, feel the sweat dripping off of his chest onto my breast. That was the final straw. This guy had skeeved me out so bad that I didn't care if I hurt his feelings. I couldn't get a clue from my silence. I called up Sprint and had them block every number he had texted me on. I take a break from the bar. I visit back home. I focus on work. I meet a nice guy. And life gets less creepy. Then, one day, I head back to the bar. I show up and all of my friends are there, but the stalker is nowhere in sight. Turns out he was on duty or something. My friends clue me in about this guy and how he has been talking non-stop about me since I was gone, how we are dating, and how I told him not to tell anyone because I'm shy and hate PDA, how I'm going back with him to his small town, etc, etc. This sends a red flag up with my friends, since they know me fairly well and they know how I am. And besides, not being the most confrontational, I'm definitely not a shy person who would hide something so small like that. Also, he told a lot of other stories to them, one about killing an Afghan kid on accident and how he was going to be early accepted into the Secret Service, but turned it down. He had their bullshit meter ringing. I show my friends the creepy, vulgar text messages that he'd sent me and open up about how uncomfortable this guy made me, and they all agree that this new guy has to go. They all decide to block him and start ignoring him when he comes around. I continued to stay away from the bar for a while too, and enjoyed my new relationship. Some time goes by, and I find myself newly single. I walk my ass back to the bar. I finish a cigarette outside and go in. I'm saying hi to my friends and scanning the room. I sit down at a table with them. My phone beeps and I pick it up. And this is where things get pretty bad. I open my phone and it's a text from a number I don't recognize. I open the text and there is a grainy picture of me at the front of the bar smoking a cigarette from about 10 minutes prior. My eyes bug out of my skull and Danny catches sight of my face and says, "What the fuck?" I show the photo to her and say, "It's him." She has been with me through the whole ordeal and has referred to this guy as my stalker. She immediately goes into panic mode and runs and tells the bouncer that there is a guy outside the bar taking photos of me and to not let him in. Danny and the bouncer go inside, but the streets are packed and it's downtown Adams Morgan, DC in 2008. She gives the bouncer a description of this guy, but again, it's DC, and the description of a tall, blonde military guy is kinda useless since they are everywhere here. My phone goes off again and I'm starting to get freaked out, and it's him and he says,
"Do you want to see me?"
I don't answer. Then he texts again,
"I'll see you soon."
This freaks me and Danny the hell out, and we run upstairs to the bathroom to form a get the fuck out of here plan, because, for all we know, he's waiting at a bar across the street or in a car or something. At one point, I try to open the bathroom window to see if we can get out of there, but it's painted over and red paint just cracks off everywhere, and it doesn't really open. We form a new plan. We go downstairs and find the owner. He's known us for a while, and he's used to our shenanigans, but we explain to him how serious the situation is, and I'm kinda shaking at this point. He tells us that we can exit through the kitchen and out of the back door to the back alley, if we don't want to go out of the front. He has the bouncer cover us while Danny and a friend of ours came with us. We go out into the alley, and it's raining quite a bit at this point, but there's no one in sight. Anyone familiar with the DC ADMO area knows that you can literally pop out through the alley into a neighborhood, walk down the street, and pop back into another back alley, and wind up down the block if you like. So that's what we did. We took some shortcuts and made it down the street and towards the beginning strip of bars in ADMO. Not wanting the night to end or be alone, we made our way into this dive bar with a rooftop that I have never seen before. I probably should have called it a night by then. We go to the top level and take a seat at the back bar. After a few minutes, Danny does a walk around of the top floor where we are, lets me know that it's all good, and makes her way to the bathroom to dry off. Our buddy, he's now flirting with the cute bartender taking our drink order. At this point, adrenaline is pumping through me so hard I can feel my pulse in my neck. I get my drink. Rum and coke was my poison back then, as Danny has reminded me, and I start to relax. My phone is clear. I think we got away. I decide the coast is somewhat clear, and damn, do I need a cigarette. There is just a small hallway to the tiny rooftop patio, and it's where we were at the time. The bar isn't even that crowded, and there are a ton of windows out onto the rooftop, and the place is pretty well lit. There's really no way to get up to the bar without coming up to the narrow stairs that are about 30 feet from us. I alert my friends and I make my way 10 feet from the bar and open the door onto the rooftop patio. Now, it's really pouring down, but there is a bit of an awning just above the door and onto the side of the deck. And there are windows, so I can see the bar. I spark one up and look into the bar. All good. I relax a bit and start to take a few steps to the side, still under the awning. Here the bar disappears, and there is a bit of a wall sticking out and maybe 3 feet, and then windows again, and you can see into a storage room with a bunch of shelves and boxes. I peer into it and immediately freak myself out, so I step back and put out my smoke and go to head inside. That's when I hear the crack of the patio door. My heart hits the floor and I'm frozen for what feels like forever. For a second, I think maybe I'm hearing shit and it was just the rain beating down on the awning. I'm still standing behind this wall and can't see if anyone has come out. Then, I think I'm being silly and it was probably my friends just looking for me, and I don't want them to think that I have left. So, very slowly, I step out and peek from behind the wall. And there he is. I slowly step back behind the wall as if this would make him go away, and I can hear his loud boot steps getting closer. I peek out and he's coming towards me, smiling. Not wanting to die in a dark corner at a dive bar that smells like funk, I take a few giant steps out onto the patio and into the rain, and within eyesight of the bar windows. I can see my friends, and it's absolutely dumping and dark, so I doubt they'd see me. He says my name and steps closer to me. I step back a few feet and my back is against the patio railing. I look over. There is another balcony below, but no one is on it. I remember thinking if I absolutely were to jump, I will, and if he pushes me, it will hurt like hell, but I'll survive. I turn to him, not wanting to make sudden movements or alert him to the fact that I'm scared. I smile and say, "Hey, how are you? Sorry I've been away for a bit. I haven't really been around." Trying to act as natural as I can. As natural as you can act in the pouring rain with a psycho in front of you. He smiles and takes another step, and I put my hand up and kind of brace myself. I can tell from his face that he doesn't like this. He says,
Babe, you know I would never hurt you. Why are you being like this? Aren't you glad to see me? It's been so long.
He puts one hand out in an open gesture, and that's when I notice his other hand is behind his back. Has it always been like that? Now, I'm really scared. I put my hand up again and say, "Now listen." He cuts me off, grabs my arm and says,
No, you listen.
I push him off and slip a bit on the slick patio. I hit my knee pretty hard, but caught myself. Now, I'm pissed. This needs to end. Now, forgive me, listener. For the life of me, I don't know why I thought these next words would get me the fuck out of there. Maybe I thought subconsciously that these next words would make him pity me and back off. But I screamed them out at him. "Okay, motherfucker, don't you fucking touch me. You almost made me fall and I'm fucking pregnant. So back the fuck up right now or my baby's daddy is going to fuck you up." The look on his face was the stuff of nightmares. It was like at that moment, like in a horror movie, where everything goes silent. He is in shock. He's enraged. It looks like his face is going through all these emotions at once. He stares at me and contorts his face in anger, then finally sadness. His body kinda slumps. Finally he yells,
Are you serious?
"Yes," I mumble. Maybe this will work. He stammers.
Then why are you smoking?
Fuck. He stares at me a bit and says nothing. Then, he puts his hand to his back and starts stomping and yelling.
No. It's not supposed to be like this.
And covers his face. And that's when I see it. It was a knife. Shit just got supremely real at this point. He throws his hands to his sides, and now his face is red and full of rage. I snap out of it and I scream. He's blocking my only safe way out, and I need my friends to hear me. He yells at me to shut up, then he points the knife at my stomach and yells, "Shut the fuck up, or I'll cut that baby out of you." I stop, completely horrified and taken aback. At that point, my friend Danny opens the patio door and walks out. She sees my face and sees him, and the color just drains out of her. Then she sees the knife. She stumbles back into the patio door and whips it open and yells to our buddy. Our buddy then runs out of the patio. The stalker then points the knife at him and screams,
"Is it you?"
My buddy sees the knife and without missing a beat grabs a patio chair off the ground and launches it at the stalker. It hits him hard and I make a mad dash for the patio door. We run down the hall, down the stairs and out into the street and flag down some cops. Plenty of them here in ADMO. One cop calls in and 2 run upstairs. I further explain the situation to the officers and the stalker is texting me, blowing up my phone.
"Is it true? I'll fucking kill you. You ruined our family, you slut."
The cop puts me in a cruiser and my friends in another, and they get our statements. I show the officer all the texts and how long this has gone on, and that I want to press charges. The other officers came back and say that he must have got away, and there is no camera out on the balcony. I tell them all the info I know about him. The cops contact his chain of command and leave a word with them, and I spend the next few weeks sleeping at a friend's house on her couch. No one ever gets back to me. No one lets me know what's going on or if I'm safe. The last and final thing I heard was through a mutual friend who had heard about the incident, is that the guy had received an overnight stay in jail. I never heard from him after that.
Number 6.
My story deals with a pretty common situation that happens a lot, but it still creeped me out. Every year, for summer holidays, my family and I go to my grandparents' house in a region of France called Bretagne. They live in a nice area on a cliff next to the beach, which is pretty neat. And for you to understand the situation I was in, I'll do a quick description of the place and most importantly, how to access the beach. When we get out of the house, we need to cross a little road and go to an entrance between bushes. Then, it's clear but narrow path that you can take just to enjoy the view of the sea, or you can also go towards a staircase built into the rock of the cliff. Then, you'll have to just walk on medium-sized stones, and ta-da, you've arrived to the beach. The place itself is pretty big, but there's only a few ways to access it. By the staircase I described, or by another one at the end of it. Also, big thing to mention, as I grew older, I stopped building sand castles and swimming with my family. I'm 18 now, and the older of 3 siblings, way younger than me, so I was done playing childish games, and I had started to climb the cliffs for fun. It was more of a semi-hiking of partially collapsing cliffs. This will be relevant later. Now, onto the story. Last year, after having dinner, I headed out for a little walk to the beach. No one seemed determined to come with me, so I went alone. No big deal. I did it every evening. After going down the staircase, I walked a little bit and then sat down on a stone to smoke a joint and listen to some music. Not really smart, but hey, I'm a teen in a little village that I go to every summer, and as much as I love my family, it gets pretty boring from time to time. Anyway, I'm enjoying my time when I spot a guy in the corner of my eye, at maybe 40 meters from me. No big deal. It's a free access beach after all. But then, he starts heading my direction. His head was shaved, and he had square-shaped glasses on, maybe around his mid-20s or early 30s. He was pretty tan, like he had worked outside for a long time or something. The bald dude is getting closer, but again, I don't own the beach. As he's coming next to me, I hear over my music that he's trying to talk to me. I removed my headphones and he said something along the lines of,
"Hey, you look familiar. Have we met before?"
I answered with a calm but firm no. But he keeps insisting that he saw me at the beach today. And sure, maybe he did. But there are tons of people at the beach. I don't remember anyone that I see. The way I'm responding clearly implies that I'm not interested in having a conversation with him. But he sits on a stone next to me, and he keeps talking, mostly about himself, and that he loves the beach, the weather is nice, and that I'm nice with him. That's where things start to get creepy. He says that it's rare to find nice girls, and that he's happy that I'm not a bitch. He then asks about my name, where I live, and of course, I didn't say a thing. He started to lean closer to me, which made me really uncomfortable, with a huge smile on his face. And that's when it hit me. Remember when I said that there are only a few entrances to the beach? That arsehole was sitting right between me and the staircase. I was cornered. No one was there. We were completely alone. And even though I'm quite athletic, I'm only 4'9" and weigh about 90 pounds. This guy, for me, is twice my size. He clearly wants to continue our discussion, and I'm not responding. As I'm not responding, he started to sound annoyed, clenching his fist, but still with his stupid grin glued to his face. He asked me if I was really a good girl and why I won't talk to him. I'm shitting myself at this point when I look towards my left and almost let out a sigh of relief. One of the cliffs that I like to climb onto is right next to us. They were more like hiking, not climbing, but I could run to the top of it in a matter of seconds as I'm used to doing it every day. Run on the narrow path and then go home safely. So I just got up and said, "I don't want to talk anymore. Good evening." He looked startled for a moment, looking back at the staircase for a second, which confirmed my suspicions that he thought he had blocked my only way of escaping, since the other stairs were too far away. To this day, it still scares me that this was his first reaction. At this point, I'm high, tired, and terrified, but I start to walk confidently to the cliff at a high pace, and in the corner of my eye, I can see that he is standing now, looking in my direction. As soon as I'm close enough, I literally start to jump from rock to rock as fast as I can, scratching myself in the process. When I arrive to the top, I look down and he's just there, staring at me, not smiling like before, but frowning and looking like he's on the verge of committing a crime. I then sprinted to my grandparents' house, which luckily is really close, and explained everything to my mother, and the next day I reported the guy to the police station, giving the best description that I could. Since it's a small village, they could apprehend him easily if he was a resident, but to be fair, French police suck, and nothing came of it. So yeah, sorry if it was a bit anticlimactic, but this guy actually had a plan in mind, and I'm glad I did not stick around to discover what it was.
Number 7.
I work as a security guard at Disney World, the happiest place on earth. Typically, I wouldn't say where I work, as obviously there are some pretty strict rules about things employees can put online, but I just don't think I can tell this properly without that context. And honestly, I think this may be it for me anyway with this job. I just can't see myself working here any longer now. I've been with the company for 23 years. The first 20 years I worked in the parks, nabbing shoplifters and rounding up people who were drinking too much for the heat. Occasionally there'd be a fight to break up, but people usually just kept it pretty mild. The heat and walking was getting too much for me the last few years, so I asked to be transferred somewhere with AC, and the company moved me to one of their resorts. While the working conditions were 110% better as far as climate and comfort go, the guest issues were trickier, mainly domestics. I guess the expensive and stress of vacation got to a lot of people, and I'd be called by neighbouring rooms because some mum and dad were yelling at each other. I'd try to suggest that they take a nap or go do separate activities for a bit, and that would usually calm them down. But none of that is what I'm here for. I've got to get this out there while I have time. 3 days ago, I got a call from management. Apparently, a couple of days before that, housekeeping had went into a room that should have been turned over that day. Turned over is when one guest leaves by 11 AM and the next guest checks in at around 3 PM. But all of the items belonging to the guest were still in the room. Housekeeping made a note of it and moved on. But during the next 2 days, when they entered the room, everything was still there and untouched. I went to check it out, and sure enough, there was an empty room full of luggage, clothes, snacks, some toys, and everything a family would need for vacation. The manager had already looked up the previous reservation, and it was for a family, dad, mum, 2 little kids. I tried to call the phone numbers they had given, but all I got was voicemail. We were a bit stumped, so I made the call that housekeeper could clean the room and take the family's personal items to be held until we get in contact with someone. I went digging into the reservation more. The family had arrived 5 days before housekeeping discovered all of their stuff. I found that the family had paid a parking fee and their vehicle description was listed. A quick walk to the parking lot and I had easily located their vehicle. So that ruled out a car accident or them deciding to just leave all their stuff behind. Next, I saw that they had bought a dining plan. This is when a guest prepays for all their food. They're given a certain number of credits to use for meals. This family had only used 3 credits, and the last one was 2 days after they checked in. It appeared that the day they arrived, they got here late and probably just stayed on the resort. The next day, they used 2 credits at Epcot. And the second park day, they used just 1 credit at Magic Kingdom, and it was at breakfast time. Now, at Disney, we have something called magic bands. Magic bands are worn by the guests and act as a room key, park ticket, credit card, dining reservation payment, and fast pass, and many other different users. It took some work, but I was finally able to look up this family's fast pass history. The day they went to Magic Kingdom, they had breakfast at a restaurant in the park, rode a couple of rides, and then rode their last ride, which was It's a Small World, at around 11 AM. Then, nothing. Finally, it was time to bring in someone else to do this. I called an old co-worker at Magic Kingdom and asked him to pull security footage for It's a Small World at the time they rode it, and I made my way over there. When I got there, my friend was very confused, almost distraught looking. He showed me what he found. There's usually a camera in the direction of where the rides load and unload. The footage showed them scanning their bands to use fast passes for the ride and boarding the ride. The footage from the exit of the ride just showed the other people in the car exiting. They weren't there. Of course, we thought the worst. Maybe one of the kids had fallen out and mum and dad and the other kid just got off in the middle of the ride to help, and they all got injured or killed or stuck in machinery somewhere. So, we shut down the entire ride, middle of the damn day, turned off the ear-warm music, and turned up the lights. Me and my buddy walked that ride 3 times before we called in help. Eventually there was close to 10 cast members searching, and we didn't find shit, except for 3 cell phones and a hat. I was right stumped. I've kept digging the past couple of days, and I'm not sure who to tell what I had found next. I've called the police, and I suppose they're on the way, but the company has a way of covering up things like this, and I decided I can't live with myself if I don't put out some type of a warning. I kept digging into their reservation over the last couple of days, and today I noticed they had purchased Memory Maker. There are photographers all over the parks and cameras in a lot of the rides, and with Memory Maker, the photos are all free. They automatically get added to a guest's Disney account when the system knows their picture has been taken, and the system always knows. Everyone's whereabouts are always known with their magic bands. Well, I opened up their Memory Maker photo album, and I swear, there are 732 pictures. The first 30 or so are pretty normal. Epcot, a few rides in front of the castle. But the rest are all in It's a Small World. The rides only take one picture per go around. So, it appears as though this family had ridden this ride over 700 times. The first picture was pretty normal. Everyone looked happy. It was a busy day and a full car of guests. The next one is rough to look at. The car is empty except for this family, and they look so darn confused. The next 10 to 15, I can see the dad getting angry and yelling. The mum is holding on to those kids like her life depends on it, and you can see the kids getting increasingly upset and crying, and it goes on and on and on. After 50 or so, it looks like they're trying to get out. In one of the pictures, the dad is missing. In another, they're all gone. Maybe like they've bailed early in the ride and tried to walk out. But in the very next one, they're all right back in that damn car. After around 450 or so, I only see the mum and the kids. And it's just when I look closely I can see the dad. Maybe just his body now, slumped down in one of the other seats. Since about 675, there's just mum and one kid, another body in another seat. The mum and the kid aren't moving anymore. I think them two are still alive, just damn near catatonic, looking straight ahead, pale. And I swear to God, guys, I swear on my fucking life, the dolls are moving or something. In some of these pictures, I can tell they aren't where they should be. I even saw one with a doll in the car with this family. I can't look anymore or I'm going to lose my lunch. I closed the album. Its file size has increased since I closed it. God, are there new pictures being added now? I see on security cameras that the local PD just arrived, so they'll take over soon. I wish I knew what the hell was going on, but I also wish this damn thing had never landed in my lap. I don't think I'll be able to update this. After I talk to the police, I think I'm going to walk out of here and never come back. I just wanted to get this out there, but Disney feeds the media some bullshit cover-up as to why a whole family vanished. They didn't vanish. I know where they are.
Number 8.
I rode It's a Small World for the last time in the 90s. I will never step foot on that ride again. Even when I have taken my kids to Disney, I absolutely refuse to get on that ride. I still have some nightmares about what I saw in there, and I was not the only one. I went on a school trip at the end of the year, and it was nighttime when we went on it. We had already been on every other ride at least twice, and someone in our group has been begging us to ride it since earlier in the day, so we finally agreed. It was close to closing time, and our last ride for the night. So I think we were the only people riding, or if there were others, there were only a couple of them. We had about 6 people in our group. I will never be able to forget this for as long as I live. We were about halfway through, I don't remember which country we were in, or really anything about my surroundings. I was so freaked out that I couldn't focus on anything else. My friend had started tugging violently on my arm, so I look over at her. She has tears in her eyes, her mouth is wide open, and she's trying to speak, but can't get anything out, and she's just forcefully pointing down at the water under us. Just the expression on her face and the way she was acting was enough to terrify me, and I really didn't want to look down, but I had to know what had scared her so badly. I forced my gaze away from her and slowly leaned over the side. There was only a few inches in between the boat and the wall, but it was enough. The water under us was full of countless disembodied faces, all of them frozen in pain, full of terror, their mouths open in silent screams. At this point I started to scream at the top of my lungs, scaring the shit out of everyone. They start turning around or reaching forward to try and calm me down, but I just kept saying something like, "They're under us. Oh my god, there are so many of them in the water. They are trapped in the water." So of course, everyone immediately starts leaning over and trying to look into the water. But there is nothing there, just the murky water and the rails that the boats ride on. My friend and I were inconsolable. As soon as we started to get off the ride, the person that was at the controls came running up to us and asking if we were okay. My friend and I tried to tell them what we saw through our tears, and as soon as I said something about faces in the water, her expression froze and all of the color drained from her face. And the way she responded said it all. She managed to quickly collect herself and tried to reassure us, telling us that it was just reflections from the dolls' faces. But we knew better. Our friends guided us back to the park entrance, where we waited for everyone else. They wanted us to tell the chaperones, but we refused. We knew no one would believe us, so we just left and didn't speak of it again. I have stayed friends throughout the years with the other girl that saw what I saw, and she has never returned to Disney, and probably never will. And I don't blame her at all. We tried to talk about what we saw a couple of times, but within a few minutes we both start to get really upset, too upset to continue. All I can think is what caused all of those poor souls to be trapped like that. Where did they come from? Why are they stuck there? And why are they screaming and terrified in what's supposed to be the happiest place on earth?
Number 9.
I'm a hard skeptic when it comes to stuff happening around the rides, but it's this ride that made me reconsider. I worked at Disneyland back in 2012, and right before I left to start my new job, I decided to use my free entry one more time. I hit all of the usual rides, and before I left the park for the last time as a cast member, I wanted to get all nostalgic and ride Small World. It was all well and good until the end of the Europe section. There was like a sweet little Swiss Alps girl that I noticed wasn't in the Switzerland section. I mean, she was close, but I'd ridden that thing like 100 times and knew it like the back of my hand. But I was like, whatever. I'm definitely not in the inner circle, and they don't need my approval to change the location of the puppets. Then, I shit you not, I saw her again in each of the next 4 areas. Only she wasn't dancing and singing along with the other characters, just sort of lurking in the background, but still very visible. It was one of those things where I didn't really believe what I was seeing, but I was absolutely certain of what I saw. So, it was late at night. I was on the ride by myself since I was friends with the people that ran the ride, and I was thoroughly freaked out. I was doing anything to distract myself, and then I make it to the little finale of the ride. I'll never forget. I saw that little fucking piece of shit doll hugging the sign that said Shalom. First rationalization thought was that it was a prank, that somehow my dickhead friends set this up for me since it's my last time. But they were adamant that they didn't, and that it couldn't be possible. They don't have duplicates of the puppets. If one breaks, they either fix it after the park closes, or get a new one specifically made. Apparently, Swiss Alps Girl had been decommissioned because no matter how many times they fixed her, she still wouldn't seem to dance or sing with the rest of the puppets.
Number 10.
This happened a few years ago when I was 13 years old. I was somewhat popular in school at the time, and I had around 4 very close friends. Rose, Lynn, Noah, and Zach were the main ones. We went on many adventures around that time, camping, road trips, the beach. Noah's family was pretty wealthy, and all of our families were pretty lenient with rules. One day, the summer before 8th grade, we went on a camping trip with Lynn's older sister Margaret and Zach's older brother Todd. So there were 7 of us. Lynn, Zach, and I were 13. Noah and Rose were 14, and Margaret and Todd were both 17. We decided to go camping in a nearby forest, around 20 miles from Noah's house. It was pretty much in the middle of nowhere. Noah's house and his neighborhood were the closest homes, and there were no signals for phones or any electronics. We get to the spot easily, and without problems, and we make camp. The girls in one tent, the boys in another. Maybe it was a bad idea to have 17s ages 13 to 17 with no phone signals in the woods, but our parents were lenient, as I said, and confident that we would be fine since these woods were not known for anything bad or dangerous. So, we set up the tents, go swimming in a nearby lake, and come back and make dinner over a fire which was about 20 feet away from the tents, which were 4 feet away from each other. We have s'mores and do all those stupid camping things before Lynn and Margaret announced that they were going to sleep. That left Todd, Rose, Zach, Noah, and myself, as we joked around and told scary stories, and just overall had a good time. Then, Margaret walks up annoyed and tells us that whoever it was messing around with the side of the tent should stop. Keep in mind, no one left the group, and the tents were far enough away so we wouldn't bother anyone inside the tents. She explains that someone keeps on touching the side of the tent, running something on it, and we dismiss her. Todd states that it's probably a tree branch, and Rose and I decided to go to sleep at this point. So we head back to the tent. Lynn is asleep, and we settle in. Me closest to the opening, Margaret next to Lynn, who's at the opposite side of the tent, and Rose in between Margaret and myself. I managed to fall asleep easily within 5 minutes, until I woke up suddenly for what seemed like no reason. I checked my phone. I still brought it and a portable charger with it just to take pictures, and it was literally the middle of the night at around 2:15. I looked around, my eyes getting used to the darkness, trying to figure out why I woke up. A tapping sound on the tent was what I noticed first, and a soft giggling. It sounded somewhat deep, like a male voice, but I couldn't be sure. After what felt like an hour, but was probably a minute or 2, the tapping and giggling stopped. I was convinced that it was my imagination, or maybe one of the boys trying to prank us, or even a tree branch, like Todd suggested earlier. Telling myself it was a tree branch and a lack of sleep, I fell back asleep until Rose woke me up at around dawn. Everyone was awake and we decided to hike a little. We decided to go into 2 groups because we planned on spending the night again, and we didn't want anyone messing around with our stuff. Even though these woods weren't popular with camping, we didn't want to risk it. Margaret, Lynn, Rose and myself left to go hiking for a couple of hours, while the boys opted out to stay behind and fish, swim and cook food. We hiked for about 2 hours, and we came back to the boys, not at the campsite. Annoyed, Margaret went down to the lake with Lynn to find them. Rose and myself made our way back to the tents. And I'll be honest and say, I screamed and almost wet my pants The tents were slashed. I inspected it closer after regaining composure, because I was usually the more collected one of the two of us. It seemed like it was done with a small knife, as the cuts were tiny. Our tents were made of material that was pretty hard to cut into, and it seemed like the person had a pocket knife, I guessed. The boys, Margaret and Lynn, came running to our screams, and were obviously startled. We decided to pack up and head back home early, because for one, the tents were ripped too much to use again comfortably, and two, Rose and Lynn and I were very creeped out. We were even more freaked out when Todd announced that his tires were slashed. We were all freaking out, obviously. There was no cell service, Todd's tires were slashed, and there was no way any of us wanted to stay any longer. Luckily, Todd reported that Margaret's tires looked fine, and Margaret stated that she would take Noah and Lynn, drop them off to call 911 and their parents, and come back for us. She drove a car where there was not enough room for more than 3 people, as the back was filled up with the camping stuff. Zach, Todd, Rose and myself were left at the campgrounds, and we decided to begin a hike back towards the main road so Margaret wouldn't have to drive so far. Also, Rose and myself refused to stay anywhere near the camp area. We began hiking. My phone died. The last time I looked at it, it was 1 in the afternoon. Zach and Rose both had working phones and constantly updated us on how far we had been walking. I began to hear branches snapping from behind us, closer to the trees than we walked, and I got more and more paranoid as time went on, even though it was daytime. I told Todd, and he seemed to get more wary of our surroundings, constantly looking over his shoulder. We had been walking for about 30 minutes, and Margaret was probably at Noah's house or almost there, when Todd screamed, "Run!" Naturally, I looked behind my shoulder before I began running. 3 hooded figures were running towards us. 2 had knives, and they all looked around 6'3" or taller. Todd was 6'1", but I doubted that he could have defended all of us against them. Even though it was broad daylight, I couldn't make out any facial features. They all appeared over and around 200 pounds, and the shortest one was probably 6'2", but they all wore hoods and had masks on, like ski masks. It sounds really fake, I know, but I don't care if you don't believe me. What I saw was terrifying, and I was scared shitless that day. We began running, and the 3 guys finally gave up, or decided that we weren't worth terrorizing, because we lost them. We made it to the main road where we waited, walking quickly, constantly looking over our shoulders in fear until Margaret arrived. We told the police everything, and they searched the woods nearby. They never found any evidence we had been there, or that anything had happened, besides pictures of the lake around the area and the shredded tents. I'm so thankful that I told Todd about them. I have no doubt that they would have been able to catch us if he hadn't been looking over his shoulder constantly, and I'm so thankful that we all got physical activity regularly and were fast enough to outrun them, and they gave up.
Number 11.
Growing up, every summer in July and August, my family would get together and camp out for 2 weeks at White Lake State Park in Tamworth, New Hampshire. Some of my best childhood memories were made there. Rollerblading, Nerf gun wars, flashlight tag, and water balloon fights with my cousins and neighbouring kids in the campground. When I was around my late teen years, my family stopped gathering together to camp out after my grandmother passed away. One of the last years I was there, this one particular memory has stuck with me. A little over 10 years ago, I was 16 years old. It was around 10 PM at night when I noticed I had a missed call on my cheapy little track phone. My family was sitting around the campfire cooking s'mores and sharing some laughs, so I decided to go off for some privacy to return the call. I took a long, narrow trail that winds in between other campsites that at the end leads up to the bathroom. I wasn't going up to the bathroom, I just wanted to find an empty campsite and sit at a picnic table to make my call. There was plenty of those, since this whole side of the campground where I was heading was vacant. There were no other campers nearby in that area, It was quiet and dark, so I chose a campsite. I sat down at the table. The lights from the distant bathroom from up on top of the hill behind me were illuminating my surroundings just a little bit. I called my friend and was carrying on a conversation for about 20 minutes. As I'm sitting there, staring ahead, I see a silhouette coming down the road in front of me. The figure is coming towards my direction, where all these empty campsites are. I could see it was a person. It's not that unusual to see people strolling through the campground for a night walk. The people I see usually have flashlights though. This person did not. I wasn't creeped out at this point. No reason to be. I was just curiously watching. As the person got closer, I could see a better outline. And this was a man I was looking at. I also noticed his pace slowed down. I kept my eyes fixated on him as I continued conversing on my cell phone. A minute or two passes, and now he stopped moving. He's just standing there in the road, looking straight into the campsite where I am at. I don't know if he knew I could see him, but he was staring at me, and I was staring right back at him. He was a little heavy-set and tall. I could also make out that he was wearing a light jacket. I couldn't see much for facial features, but I would guess that I was staring at a man in his 30s or 40s. Alarm bells were going off in my head now. My mind had turned to mush at this point. I'm frozen. I was no longer listening to what my friend was saying on the phone. I was in a stare-off with this guy. Then, he started to move again. He was tiptoeing towards me, very carefully, like he didn't want to make noise. He put one foot in front of the other, leaned forward in a slight hunched form. It looked like he was about to charge towards me. In that moment, I snapped out of that mushy, frozen state and leaped off the picnic table and started running through the campsite back towards the trail. I could hear him trampling behind me. Leaves scuffling, heavy yet fast footsteps. Footsteps were getting louder and closer. I made it back to that narrow trail. Once he got close to where I was, I heard the sound of twigs snapping and an oof noise that came from the man, which I can only imagine him tripping or almost tripping, or maybe got face slapped by a tree branch. Most likely, he wasn't familiar with the trail like I was. Whatever the reason was, it caused him to stop chasing after me. I didn't stop to look back. I just kept running until I made it back to my family's campsite. When I got there, they were still sharing laughs and smiles by the campfire. I broke down crying and I was trembling. I explained what had just happened. My aunt spoke up and said, "Oh geez. He probably thought he knew you and was coming up to give you a good scare as a joke." She dismissed me. My cousin chimed in and said, "Yeah, he probably stopped running after he realized that he didn't actually know you. He probably feels dumb now." They all chuckle about it and change the subject. I think I was dismissed because no one wanted the good vibes of the night to be ruined, and the fact that I'm just a socially anxious person in general. I'm very cautious and shy. For that time being, I let them convince me that I was just overreacting and overthinking. But here I am years later, looking back and shaking my head over this. I wish I was taken seriously, but other than that one thing happening, it was still a great trip. It was time well spent with my family. My experience makes me think twice about going for a walk by myself anywhere. I carry pepper spray and a mini keychain alarm on me now. So, Mr. Campground Chaser or whatever the hell you were, please, let's never meet again.
Number 12.
This is really weird, and I would say a close call. When me and my friends were about 14 or 15 years old, we used to go camping in the woods by our houses, a place called the Punchy that was pretty close to an old church and a graveyard, but far away enough as to not creep you out. Anyway, we used to take 2 tents, and obviously not telling our parents, we would steal some beer to take with us. This one time in particular, a few girls from school came with us too. Naturally, they also lied to their parents about where they would be. Anyway, story goes, we were getting drunk and playing dares, typical teen stuff, sitting around a fire with logs as seats, and we would just have fun. It's getting pretty late, and so some people had gone home by this point, and so there were still 7 of us, 4 boys including myself and 3 girls. It's dark now, probably about 10 PM, and we had split up the 2 tents. We were still drinking and generally playing dates that revolved around kissing and telling truths. This is when I hear the footsteps coming from the trees outside the tents, and I found this super strange, so I stuck my head out through the opening, but nothing was there. This weirded me out, but I forgot about it after 5 minutes. Then it happens again. I look, and nothing. This begins to really weird me out. So I ask if anyone else had noticed the sounds, and they say no. So at this point I'm thinking, damn, I must be drunk and hearing random things. Next thing I know, there is something brushing against the tent. And if you've ever run your fingers along a tent, then you know the distinctive sound that it makes. You'd recognize that sound anywhere. So I couldn't see it move, like it wasn't the section that we were sitting on. At this point, everyone else had noticed the sounds, and the tent is dead silent. You could hear a pin drop. And it stayed silent for about 2 minutes. Now, if you've ever been in a situation like this, the silence is deafening, and it feels like breaking the silence will have dire consequences. My friend says, "Did you guys hear that?" We all say yes. "Well, what was it?" "A branch or something," I replied, because I didn't really know what to say, but I wanted to say something. We all stick our heads out of the tent, and once again, nothing. I was certain that someone was out there, and I just got that gut feeling that you get. When you know, and I felt like I knew. The tent was in the middle of the woods, but it was inside a clearing, and there were no branches anywhere near close enough to have touched the tent. Also, no paths, so nobody would have any reason to be nearby. We carry on believing that we were going mad. Then, out of nowhere, something hit the tent like pretty hard. So we gasped, and all of us moved back towards the end of the tent, opposite the opening. Not that it would have done any good, because it's a tent. I realized something is definitely wrong, and grabbed the bat that we had used to hit the pegs in. I can't remember what my friend said, but I remember it being something to do with our friends that left, pranking us. We thought they came back to scare us. It put me at ease for a bit, and I agreed, so me and my friend left the tent and started laughing and asking our friends to show themselves. We were laughing nervously, but no one showed up. I found this super weird because, it was like the jig was up and they had had their scare. So where the hell are they? I walked over to the next door and told my friend who was in there with his girlfriend that the other guys had come back and are pranking us, so don't be shocked or scared if they do anything weird, and that they were being assholes. He agreed that that was likely. We went back into my tent. Then, my friend in the tent next door, which was only a few yards away, said that he was going for a piss, and if he could please borrow the flashlight. I threw it outside the tent and carried on talking to the others. About a minute later, he pops his head back inside and asks for the flashlight again, and I said that I just threw it out for him. He said he didn't see where it went because he was throwing clothes on while he was inside the tent. We assumed the flashlight had rolled away or something, so we had a little look around and couldn't find it. I found this real strange because there really wasn't anywhere for it to go. The ground was fairly level, and I couldn't see it rolling anywhere, not to mention it was bright green and would have obviously stood out. So I lent my friend the lantern and told him to be quick because we would have no light, and I didn't like the idea of no light considering things were getting weird, and I tried to convince him to piss without the lantern, but he wasn't having it. He walks off and we carry on talking. There is 6 of us at this point, as my friend's girlfriend joins us because she didn't want to be in the tent on her own while her boyfriend went for a piss. Next minute, my friend comes back from taking a piss. He sticks his head back in the tent, panicking, and says, "Hey guys, I'm not fucking kidding, but there is a man out there." I thought he was fucking around, but I also panicked a bit because if it was our friends pranking us, surely we would have heard them laughing or something by now. I stuck my head outside the tent and no one was there, but my friend said that he was standing outside just beyond the tree line. And my friend looked fucking terrified, so I took his word for it at this point. The girls were panicking and I didn't really know what to do. We whispered amongst ourselves who should go and asked this guy what the fuck he was doing here and if our friend was seeing things. So we agreed 3 of us would go. We took the little bat and walked to the tree line, and sure enough, there is this man just standing there. He had long messy hair and a beard, but was slim as anything and dressed in camo gear. My friend asked what he was doing here, to which he replied in a weird and blank manner, "I'm walking." We asked why he was walking in the middle of nowhere and if he was the one by our tents messing with us, to which he replied, "Them tents ain't yours." This guy was fucking weird, and he was creepy as anything. Just his expression. He then casually walked off into the woods, and we were standing there deciding if we should all leave and go home, and eventually we did. We wanted to leave, but it was too dark and it would be very difficult for us to find our way with just a lantern. We decided to sit on it, so we all got into my tent and waited out until the morning. About 2 hours had passed and we couldn't sleep. Next thing I know, I hear something that sounds like unzipping noise, and this creeped me the fuck out because it was coming from my friend's tent and we were all in my tent. His tent must be empty. Everyone starts whispering what the hell that noise was. One of my friends and myself stuck our heads out of the tent, and there is absolutely nothing there. So we decided to all go outside and look. The 4 boys went outside, so we walk over to the tent and my friend gasps and says, "We need to get the fuck out of here, now." I was confused, so I walked around the other side of the tent, and it's been slashed open corner to corner from behind, and inside the tent was the little green flashlight. Now, this made me freak out because A, we knew this guy wasn't playing around because he just ruined a very expensive tent, and B, he had something very sharp to cut the tent like that. We walked back over to the other tent and got the girls out and most of our stuff, and we left. We started walking towards the road through the woods. The scariest part about this entire thing is that every so often when we were walking towards the road, we could repeatedly hear whispering, but rapid and repetitive whispering, not loud enough to figure out exactly what it was saying or where it was coming from. It felt like an eternity, but this guy was definitely stalking us. After about 35 minutes we got to the road, and we followed the road home because we didn't want to tell our parents we'd been drinking, and if we walked home it would take about 2 hours, so we wouldn't be so drunk when we get home. We were looking behind us the entire time, terrified. Luckily, we all got home safely. The next day we get back to the camping spot to check it out, and sure enough, the tents are gone. A few weeks later, someone we know from school got chased by a weird guy wielding a knife, not far from where we were camped, who had camo clothing. This guy was truly terrifying, and it ruined camping for me.
Number 13.
Last summer, my boyfriend and I went camping in some nature preserve in Pennsylvania. I can't remember the name. It was pretty primitive camping. No cell service, and we saw 2 other people there the entire time. It was huge, so it was pretty empty. My boyfriend pretty much immediately said that those 2 people that we saw seemed off to him right away. I don't know if they had anything to do with what had happened that night, but I'll describe it. The first person was a woman who had her truck parked off the trail and the hood open. I don't really notice these types of things, but my boyfriend said it looked to him as if she was waiting for someone to pull up next to her and offer to help with her truck. Normally, my boyfriend is the type of person to just call for help at least, but he said that she skeeved him out enough that he didn't want to be drawn to her attention more than what's necessary. The next person we saw drove by several times while we were setting up. He just kept driving by slowly and looking at us. I didn't even notice though until my boyfriend pointed out to me that he'd already done that twice. Whether these 2 people had anything sinister going on or not, the real story has to do with what woke us up at around 3 a.m. It was incredibly loud and sudden. I couldn't describe it or even compare it to anything, but my boyfriend said that to him it sounded similar to a chain gun revving up or someone using large tool to scrape gravel. My boyfriend jumped up and looked out the little window of the tent. The sound happened again and again, and it was getting noticeably closer each time. I was about to piss myself, but my boyfriend told me that it was probably miles off. I didn't question this because loud noises can be heard from miles off, right? Well, later on, my boyfriend told me that at the time he told me that it was far away because he didn't want to scare me. And it actually sounded like it was coming right from down the little dirt road. At one point, he said that he suspected it was right in front of our campsite. The only reason he didn't tell me to get out and dart for the car was because he was afraid it could be someone trying to scare us out of the tent for some dreadful reason. He whispered, and I should have noticed that he was whispering and knew that something was wrong, since otherwise he'd just speak to me normally, right? But anyway, he whispered for me to just go back to sleep. However, I could not, because every little sound that I heard outside sounded like someone was sneaking up to the tent. Eventually my boyfriend told me to get out and help him pack up. It was about 20 minutes after that sound had stopped. He held our only weapon, a machete, in front of him. It was a full moon, or close to it, so we didn't need a light. While we were packing quickly, I noticed something terrifying. I noticed an empty beer can close to our dead campfire. And it wasn't there when we went to sleep at around 10 p.m, and neither of us even brought any beer. There was someone on our campfire right next to our tent. Thankfully, we got out of there, and for the rest of that trip, we either camped in areas well populated by other campers, or we got a hotel room. So whoever, or what the fuck that was, let's never meet again.
Number 14.
I'm sharing this experience literally from last night, because A, it's creepy as hell, at least for me, and B, I want people to learn from my experience. This is a precautionary tale. I understand that this was my fault, but maybe if I can help one person by telling my story, it's worth it. I don't drink as a general rule, but once a month or so I'll go out with friends and binge. My friends and I had a great night at a bar in the city, and they left. I was chatting up a cute guy, so I decided to stay. I went back to his place. After we had finished our business, very unsatisfying for anyone interested, I'm ready to head home, so I call an Uber to pick me up. I don't know where I am. I know the city I'm in, but not my exact location. I order the Uber, but it's taking forever. Requesting. So I cancel it and try again. Pretty soon, a car pulls up. I drunkenly mumble something like, "Is this the Uber?" and hop in. Mistake. Ubers apparently are supposed to have some kind of marking on the vehicle. The guy pulls away and starts driving. We're chatting. I'm fumbling for a cigarette. And the next thing I notice is that we're headed on the highway, but in the opposite direction of where I thought we needed to drive. And we're going at a solid 90 miles per hour. Then, I get a call from my Uber driver. He's there, and I'm not, because I'm in a car with a fucking nutsack. I start texting my friend, frantically counting off mile markers for her. Then I realize that's going to do nothing, because she's probably drunk too. So I call 911, but I realize this guy is crazy. He's refusing to let me out of the car, so I've got to do it on the sly. And it's been 40 minutes. I'm terrified. I don't know where I am. I don't know who this is. And we're driving at over 100 miles per hour, weaving in and out of traffic. This guy is trying to get me to hang up the phone call.
Yo, get off the phone. The fuck are you calling? Better not be a snitch.
And also smoking pot. So I don't want to do anything that might provoke a violent reaction from him. I just don't know the guy. I start chatting to the 911 dispatcher, as if it's my friend, praying that they will catch on. "Hey girl, it's me. Yeah, I'm with someone right now. We're on the highway." "No, sweetie, it's not my Uber. I thought it was, but it's not. It's a shame you can't come and meet me and bring friends." Thanks sweet baby Jesus, the operator catches on. He gets me to stay on the phone while he sends cops, and we develop a code. If I see cops, I'm supposed to casually put my hand out of the window, which looks semi-normal because I'm smoking a cigarette anyway. We pull into some random little housing complex, and he pulls out some powder and forms 2 lines. I now have confirmation that this man does drugs and could be really high on something, which means he's probably emotionally volatile. I relay this to the operator, in code. "Oh girl, I wish you were here right now. This guy just busted out the coke. You'd love it. He's taking a really big bump. Man, after my own heart." Pretty soon, I can see the lights from the cop cars, so I start waving my hand out the window. At this point, I don't care if he's onto me or not. I don't know if he has a weapon, but I slump down in my seat just in case things get hot. The cops surround us, get him out of the car, and then, when it's safe, they extricate me as well. They whisk me to the hospital for a drug test and evaluation, and that is where my story ends. On my way to the hospital, as I'm explaining all this to the officer, I find out that out of the guy's 40-ish years on this earth, he's been in federal prison for 30 of them, for violent offenses. I want people to learn from my mistakes, and if nothing else, call 911 and stay on the line. Thank you.
Number 15.
I've had a lot of bad luck in my life when it comes to violent encounters with the wrong sort of people, though unfortunately this wasn't the first incident and far from the last. Graduating from a relatively prestigious high school with an emphasis in engineering, I decided without much thought to pursue a degree in engineering in college. In the end, I gained an admission to Virginia Tech and headed off to Southwest Virginia in the August of 2006. Long story short, it was a big and somewhat difficult adjustment, and it wasn't going quite as well as I would have liked. As an interesting aside, on the very first day of classes, in fact in my very first college class ever, one of the school staff stuck their heads in the dorm and told us that class was being cancelled for the day, and that we should head back to our dorms and stay there because there may have been a shooter on campus. Wait, what? It turns out that there had been an inmate at the local hospital in town, and he had killed a security guard in order to escape, and the authorities believed that he might head to campus to blend in with the thousands of students. I remember he was caught, but I don't think he was on the campus. I honestly can't remember that part, but it was kind of a weird way to start college. No huge deal though, right? Well, more like a very small dress rehearsal for what was about to come. Anyway, fast forward to 8 months later, mid-April. I woke up Monday morning in my dorm room in Cochrane Hall at about 7:30, if memory serves. Looking out of my window to the northeast, I could see across the courtyard to West Ambler Johnston, and down to the courtyard below was an ambulance. Now, you have to understand, Virginia Tech is a huge school. When I went there in 2006-07, there was something like 26,000 students in attendance. Because the school is located in a rural area, they provided basic medical services and EMS on campus. With this many kids running around, getting drunk, forgetting to take meds, taking too many medications, having epilepsy, diabetic attacks, etc., it wasn't super uncommon to see an ambulance on campus, so I didn't think much of it. I did check my campus email to make sure everything was okay, and in the absence of any warnings about anything, I pulled some clothes on and shoes and shuffled over to D2, a huge buffet-style dining hall, to get some food before French class at 9. Having accomplished this, I proceeded across campus to Holden Hall, which is basically the east wing of a bigger building. The best wing of the building is called Norris Hall. French class had started, and I think we were talking about Sarkozy and the upcoming French elections, when we started hearing the weird sounds of the PA system outside. The week before had included some minor disruptions to our schedule in the form of prank bomb scares, and we figured some idiot was at it again. No big deal. Boy, were we wrong. About 5 minutes later, we see some cop cars pull up outside, and about a minute after that, we see more cop cars pull up along with a big van, and out of the van come several men dressed in full black body armor with what looked like M16s. So, maybe not a bomb scare anymore. At this point, our instructor was having some trouble keeping us focused on our lesson anymore, and sort of allowed us to watch what was going on, and someone said that we should turn the TV on and see if there was any information on the news. The information wasn't totally clear from the TV, but it seemed that someone had shot 8 people on campus, and I remember us talking and saying that there was no way that this was that many people. At this point, I decided that I should call my mother. I whipped out my phone, not caring that we were still in class, and dialed my mum. Thankfully, she answered. "Hey mum, are you watching the news right now?"
No, I'm at work.
"I know, but you should probably turn it on because I just wanted to let you know that I'm okay before the phone stopped working." I recalled from after 9/11 that everyone and their mother was trying to call loved ones that day, so the cell grid was basically overloaded and most calls wouldn't go through, and I assumed that the same thing was going to happen here, even if nothing had actually happened. The grid did eventually go down later. I said goodbye and also called my friend Ali to make sure that she was okay, especially since she lived on the same building that I'd seen the ambulance earlier. She was fine, and I went back to watching the news. It came to light at this point that there had apparently been more than one shooting at the school, at Ali's building, West AJ, and now at Norris Hall, which we'd already figured out on our own. Looking out of the window at the ever-growing sea of cop cars below us on Drillfield Drive and on the field itself, we suddenly hear outside the windows from the other end of the building. We all looked at each other, and suddenly, this was way more serious. This was real. People were being shot outside our building. And at this point, we decide that maybe we should be a little more proactive about our safety. We turn the lights off, turn the TV off, and start rearranging the furniture in the room to block the door. Though immediately the makeshift barricade probably wouldn't have stopped a really determined person from getting inside, since the door had frosted glass on its upper half instead of being solid.
We figured that this was better than nothing and sat down on the floor near the front of the door, talking to each other in hushed tones. After about 15 minutes, we hear footsteps outside the room. Everyone freezes and no one makes a sound. I remember looking up from the floor towards the door, wondering if this was it. Is this how I die? A few seconds later, we hear a tap on the door and a deep voice.
This is Deputy so-and-so. Stay where you are, leave your lights off and stay quiet. We'll be back for you as soon as we can.
This was not a member of either the campus police or the Blacksburg police. But from looking out of the window, we already knew that there were cops there from everywhere within the driving distance. We all look around at each other in solemn silence. We'd all just been thinking the same thing before the deputy had spoken. Thankfully, he hadn't asked us to open the door, because I don't think anyone would have even gotten up from where they were sitting. We stayed down and quiet for a couple more hours. I can't really remember what it was we talked about while I was there, since we were all so keyed up. It's been a long time waiting, and then we hear footsteps again outside the door. This time, we saw evidence of who the man was before he spoke. A gold badge pressed up against the frosted glass assured us that what we heard was legitimate.
This is Deputy so-and-so. It's time to go.
We all quietly got up and grabbed our backpacks. A couple of guys in the class, myself included, started pulling the tables away from the door as quickly and as quietly as we could, and then we cracked the door. I think on some level, all of us expected that this was a trick. But when we opened the door, standing a few feet away was a sheriff's deputy in uniform, with his sidearm drawn and held at his side. He held his finger up to his lips, indicating that we should be quiet, and he dropped his voice to a whisper. You're going to walk downstairs as quickly as you can. There are 2 more cops by the door outside. They know you're coming. Just walk straight outside and don't stop. He nodded at us and we started making our way downstairs. He got on his radio and signaled.
Students coming.
When we got to the midway landing, we could see the front door cracked and a cop peering in. Walking up to the door, he opened it wider to let us pass. And as he did, he looked straight at us and said quietly but very seriously after signaling on his radio, "Run." Walking out that door into the morning light, I was greeted by a sight I will never forget. I have never seen so many cop cars in one place in my entire life, and I honestly hope I never have cause to again. There were easily 200 or 300 Crown Vics and a smattering of additional vans, trucks, and command center vehicles crowding every inch of space, starting about 100 feet from that door. In front of those vehicles stood a phalanx of at least 40 officers, armed with M16s and even a couple with MP5s, directly in our path. As soon as we were outside, the several cops to the left and right of this formation waved at us in an unmistakable gesture of, "Move your ass." We ran off to the left of the cops with the big guns, over Drillfield Drive and onto the drill field itself, and didn't stop until we were almost to the other side. I read the news online after I got to my dorm. MSNBC had something at the bottom of an article that said something like, "If you have any information about this, please contact us." Thinking little of it, I emailed them with my contact information, and within 10 minutes my phone absolutely blew up. I was beset with interview requests and questions from at least 20 different people, and actually arranged to meet their news crew down at the inn that evening. The inn is the on-campus hotel. I ended up doing 2 national interviews, one on Scarborough Country and another with Geraldo Rivera, who was kind of self-absorbed but was cool enough to order us pizza and sit with us while we ate before the interview. The second was with my 2 friends who had agreed to accompany me down to the circus that the inn had become. I did a few more for some local radio stations and some print news before deciding that I had had quite enough for the day and went back to my dorm to get some sleep. I hadn't really been sold on the whole college experience up until that point, but strangely enough, if anything, the whole experience seemed to bring me and my friends closer together for the last month at school. Luckily for me, No one I knew was hurt beyond a friend of a friend breaking his leg badly from jumping out the window from Professor Liviu Librescu's classroom. Check this guy out, an engineering professor who survived the Holocaust and as his final act held that door of his classroom shut to give his students time to escape. He died at the scene, but was really a hero. The rest of the tragedy is part of the public record. I'm sad to say that I left Virginia Tech after that year for completely unrelated reasons and always missed it, but I still talk to my friends from that first year and I miss both the place and their company. Virginia Tech seems to have had a horrible patch of bad luck starting in 2006 and lasting for a few years, also including a really gruesome beheading in a dining hall, an accidental death, and a suicide, a close call with carbon monoxide poisoning for the entire cheerleading team at the inn, all in the year following the big shooting. They also had a couple who were attending the school abducted and murdered a few years ago. But IIRC. It happened further north in the state, I think, near Charlottesville. Luckily, I never experienced any of that. I think I'd fulfilled my quota of random bad luck, at least for a while. Cho Seung-hoo. I'm really glad we never met. And also, that we never will.
Number 16.
This just occurred this past November. A close friend and I were on a fall break from college and decided to go to an Odessa concert in downtown Chicago. We grew up in the suburbs, so going to Chicago to have some fun was common for us. Anyways, we had a great time at the concert and decided to Uber home, since we weren't close to the train station. My friend told me that Uber wasn't working for him at the time, so I called the Uber. But this was literally my first time ever calling one, and I accidentally called an Uber pool, not knowing what it was. My friend saw that and was like, it doesn't really matter. So the driver picks us up from right outside the concert venue. There were a lot of intoxicated people around us, as one could imagine post-Odessa show. But we were pretty sober, as all we did was smoke some weed, on which we were used to. We get in the car and everything is going normal, but we didn't notice the direction the driver was taking us, as we were wrapped up in talking about the show. Turns out, the driver was going to the south side of Chicago, on which we realized after some time by looking at maps. But our suburb was exactly the opposite direction of this lengthy drive south. We decided to attribute this to the fact that it was an Uber pool, and shrugged it off, until we picked up his next passenger. To be honest, this girl was scary. I don't like to judge people, but she scared us just by how she looked and how she talked. Once the girl got in, we asked the driver where we were going first, to which he stopped answering. Next thing I know, my phone lit up and said that the Uber trip was cancelled. And for this duration of the ride, Uber had no record of me being in the car. I asked the driver what the deal was, and he didn't answer. The girl and the driver 100% knew each other, as they were calling each other nicknames. The girl was being weird and seemed to be doing some hand signals to him or something. Then, we proceeded to drive further south to this neighborhood, the sketchiest neighborhood I've ever seen. I didn't realize neighborhoods like this even existed. Every house was completely wrecked, and most streetlights were out or flickering. Homeless people were living on sidewalks, and there were beat down warehouses and alleys. This was by far the scariest area that I've ever seen. No one who cared would hear a scream in this area. Once we started seeing all of this, our hearts dropped because the driver would still not respond to us. My friend then looked over to me and whispers, "We need to get the fuck out of here." To which I replied, "Dude, look where we are." And so we stayed in the car. The driver continued driving down this alley behind a warehouse where the streets ended and there were just fields beyond it. The driver is going down this alley at like 2 miles per hour, really slow, but just keeps going. The girl and Uber driver were completely discussing something serious, but we couldn't make it out, since they were mostly signals. At that time, our hearts sank even more, and we literally both thought that we were going to be killed in this alley, or at best, someone was going to get in the car and rob us. He stopped, the doors unlocked, and I was in complete shock with a pale face when all of a sudden, my friend says, "Hey, I'm completely sober, and I'm about to fucking call 911. I'm assuming the driver was waiting around the concert to pick up wasted people to allow this to happen, but we were pretty sober. My friend was serious. He was about to call 911. He had dialed 911 on his phone, and the Uber driver looks back at us in shock after he sees 911 dialed and my friend's finger about to push call. He looks at the girl, and the girl is in shock too. She nods her head no and says, "What the fuck are you doing, Ray?" talking to the driver, and then she gets out. The driver then drives out of the neighborhood and onto the highway towards our suburb. All of a sudden, my Uber app gave a notification saying that we were on a ride. All of a sudden, the driver starts talking to us again, but he wasn't giving any answers, just saying that he's driving us home. We were asking what the fuck just happened, and he wouldn't answer stuff like that. He would answer about where we're going, but nothing about what just happened. We got home safely and reported the Uber driver for this ride, because he was obviously messed up and they were up to something bad. And we suspect that the Uber driver was waiting around for wasted people to call the pool so he could get away with this, but realized we were too big of a risk when it came time to do what they were planning to do. We've accepted that we were part of a mugging scheme and got lucky we decided not to get drunk at the concert. We had anxiety for weeks after this, but we now know just how sketchy areas can be and how to be more safe in Chicago. Just don't call an Uber pool outside of a concert or a bar. It's so weird to me that people live this sketchy life and do things like this to people. But it was eye-opening. Hey guys, it's the Grim Reader here. Long time no see. Long time no hear, I guess. You might be wondering, where have you been, Grim Reader? Well, there's a very simple answer to that question. I've been very, very busy with just life. University has been taking so much time. Lots of studying, family things. So I just didn't really have much time. But now that it's the summer holidays, I've got plenty of time and I can upload a lot more now. So I hope you haven't been disappointed with my absence. I tried several times, but I just didn't have the a quiet place to upload or enough time, or just at one point I didn't even have a mic. So it took a while, but now that I have plenty of time and a quiet place, I'll be uploading pretty much every day for the next month at least. And then after that, it should be at like 2 or 3 times a week. So watch out for those videos. And yeah, I'm back. It's been a while. I miss uploading videos. Yeah, I miss making those weird noises in the outros and the intros. But yeah, I'm back. I hope you guys haven't gone away. But yeah, here I am. I thought I'd explain where I've been. It's only fair that I do so, since so many of you have been messaging me constantly, leaving comments, messaging me on Instagram and asking me where I've been. Well, I've just been around really. I've just been really busy. But here I am. I hope you guys will like the videos. I hope you will enjoy these videos once again. So sorry about my absence, but I'm back.